My thing with school lunch is it's a social justice issue. I'm the Director of Nutrition Services for Berkeley Unified School District. I have 90 employees in 17 locations, 9,600 kids. I'm doing 7,100 meals a day. And I've been doing it for 2 years, trying to change how we feed kids in America. And that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about today. These are some of my kids with a salad bar. I put salad bars in all of our schools. When I got there, everyone says it couldn't be done. Little kids couldn't eat off the salad bar. Big kids would spit in it. Neither happened. When I took over this, I tried to really figure out what my vision would be. How do we really change children's relationship to food? And I'll tell you why we need to change it, but we absolutely have to change it. And what I came to understand is we needed to teach children the symbiotic relationship between a healthy planet, healthy food, and healthy kids. And that if we don't do that, the antithesis, although we've heard otherwise, is we're really going to become extinct because we're feeding our children to death. That's my premise. We're seeing sick kids get sicker and sicker. And the reason this is happening, by and large, is because of our food system and the way the government commodifies food, the way the government oversees our food, the way the USDA puts food on kids' plates that's unhealthy and allows unhealthy food into schools. And by tacitly, all of us send our kids or grandchildren or nieces or nephews to school and tell them to learn. Learn what's in those schools. And when you feed these kids bad food, that's what they're learning. So that's really what this is all about. The way we got here is because of big agribusiness. We now live in a country where most of us don't decide, by and large, what we eat. We see big businesses, Monsanto and DuPont, who brought out Agent Orange and stain-resistant carpet. They control 90% of the commercially produced seeds in our country. These are 10 companies control much of what's in our grocery stores, much of what people eat, and that's really, really a problem. So when I started thinking about these issues and how I was going to change what kids ate, I really started focusing on what we would teach them. And the very first thing was about regional food, trying to eat food from within our region. And clearly, with what's going on with fossil fuel usage, or as the fossil fuel is going away, as oil hits its peak oil, we really have to start thinking about whether or not we should or could be moving food 1,500 miles before we eat it. So we talk to kids about that, and we really start to feed kids regional food. And then we talk about organic food. Now, most school districts can't really afford organic food, but we as a nation have to start thinking about consuming, growing, and feeding our children food that's not chock full of chemicals. We can't keep feeding our kids pesticides and herbicides and antibiotics and hormones. We can't keep doing that. It doesn't work. And the results of that are kids getting sick. One of my big soapboxes right now is antibiotics. 70% of all antibiotics consumed in America is consumed in animal husbandry. We are feeding our kids antibiotics in beef and other animal protein every day. 70%. It's unbelievable. And the result of it is we have diseases, we have things like E. coli that we can't fix, that we can't make kids better when they get sick. And certainly antibiotics have been prescribed, but it's an issue in the food supply. One of my favorite facts is that U.S. agriculture uses 1.2 billion pounds of pesticides every year. That means every one of us and our children consumes what would equal a 5-pound bag, those bags you have at home, if I had one here, and ripped it open. And that pile I would have on the floor is what we consume and feed our children every year because of what goes into our food supply, because of the way we consume produce in America. The USDA allows these antibiotics, these hormones, and these pesticides in our food supply, and the USDA paid for this ad in Time magazine. Okay, we could talk about Rachel Carson and DDT, but we know it wasn't good for you and me. And that is what the USDA allows in our food supply. And that has to change, The USDA cannot be seen as the be-all and end-all of what we feed our kids and what's allowed. We cannot believe that they have our best interests at heart. The antithesis of this whole thing is sustainable food. That's what I really try and get people to understand. I really try and teach it to kids. I think it's the most important. It's consuming food in a way in which we'll still have a planet, in which kids will grow up to be healthy, and which really tries to mitigate all the negative impacts we're seeing. It really is just a new idea. I mean, people toss around sustainability, but we have to figure out what sustainable is. In less than 200 years, just in a few generations, we've gone from being 100%, 95% farmers to less than 2% of farmers. We now live in a country that has more prisoners than farmers. 2.1 million prisoners, 1.9 million farmers, and we spend $35,000 on average a year keeping a prisoner in prison, and school districts spend $500 a year feeding a child. It's no wonder, we have criminals. And what's happening is we're getting sick. We're getting sick, and our kids are getting sick. It is about what we feed them. What goes in is what we are. We really are what we eat. And if we continue down this path, if we continue to feed kids bad food, if we continue not to teach them what good food is, what's going to happen? What is going to happen? What's going to happen to our whole medical system? What's going to happen is we're going to have kids that have a life less long than our own. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control, that has said, of the children born in the year 2000, those 7- and 8-year-olds today, 1 out of every 3 Caucasians, 1 out of every 2 African Americans and Hispanics are going to have diabetes in their lifetime. And if that's not enough, they've gone on to say most before they graduate high school. This means that 40 or 45% of all school-age children could be insulin dependent within a decade. Within a decade. What's going to happen? Well, the CDC has gone further to say that those children born in the year 2000 could be the first generation in our country's history to die at a younger age than their parents, and it's because of what we feed them. Because 8-year-olds don't get to decide, and if they do, you should be in therapy. We are responsible for what kids eat. But oops, maybe they're responsible for what kids eat. Big companies spend $20 billion a year marketing non-nutrient foods to kids. $20 billion a year, 10,000 ads most kids see. They spend $500 for every $1. $500 marketing foods that kids shouldn't eat for every $1. Marketing healthy, nutritious food. The result of which is kids think they're going to die if they don't have chicken nuggets. That everybody thinks they should be eating more and more and more. This is the USDA portion size, that little tiny thing, and the one over there that's bigger than my head is what McDonald's and Burger King and those big companies think we should eat. And why